Now I'd like to introduce the next speaker of the session, architect Tahaer Zoyab, co-founder O Studio Chennai. Tahaer is an architect and urban designer graduated from School of Architecture and Planning, Anna University, Chennai. His experience as architecture paradigm, CNT, and Wall B architects cemented his interest in various facets of space design. He compounded that diversity by pursuing a master's in urban design at Columbia University. Having worked as an architect, tour guide, site worker in New York City, gave him a set palette of skills to start work on our own. He also takes great pride in sharing his knowledge through lectures and collaborative discussions with keen minds at various design schools. Let us now proceed to Architect Tahaer's presentation.
Hi friends and colleagues, my name is Tahaer Zoyab. I'm an architect and an urban designer by qualification. It's an honor to be part of this wonderful event, Icon Best. I'd like to thank Dr. P. Satish Kumar for the vision behind such a unique event, and I'd like to thank the School of Architecture and Interior Design at SRM University for hosting such an interesting event that I'm really looking forward to being part of. I'm very excited to hear from a lot of the other people presenting at today's event. I represent and I'm the co-founder of O Studio. We're a multidisciplinary studio based out of Chennai in India. We work on different scales of projects, ranging from small scale interior design work to large urban projects. We focus on most of our work through the lens of the impact that it could have on society, and a lot of the work that we do are predominantly in the realm of social centric architecture. And this decade has been an amazing journey. We've made mistakes along the way. We've had a lot of successes along the way. And along the way, as a studio and as an ecosystem itself, we've evolved. Our studio currently houses multiple initiatives that in their own ways celebrate the city. They celebrate the city through heritage. They celebrate the wonderful design and architecture in the city through photography. They celebrate the wonderful designers that we have, and our vision is to realize some of the amazing ideas that are coming out of our city. So for that, I'm very, very blessed, and I'm very grateful to all the amazing people that we work with in our space. This particular event today and my focus of my topic is going to be on some of our larger urban projects and the impact that they've had, and the many successes that we've had, and the failures that we've had, and most importantly the learnings along the way. And this is something I'm very excited to walk you through with some of the projects that we have for you in today's presentation. So I'd like to start my presentation today with this project. This particular project, the Nama Toilet project, is a project that's very, very close to our heart, because while it is a public toilet and one would think that a project of this scale can be done pretty quickly, this entire project and the process took us about 2 years all in all to realize. And what this project did more than anything else was cemented our interest as a design studio in in our understanding of collaboration, in our realization that collaborations are the way forward in case we are all wanting to up our level of quality in our work. So I say this because a project of this scale itself had a graphic designer, it had an industrial designer, it had a product designer, it had us as architects, it had a sanitation specialist, it had a fabrication specialist, and all of this was under the purview of the Commissioner of Municipal Administration, who looks after the ongoings of the state. And this was also from a studio's perspective an introduction to working in the public realm. So for me, this project is always going to be close to our heart, and we're very proud of the fact that this was awarded one of the highest and best practices in hygiene in the country. Post that, as a studio, we continued this journey of working with as many different minds, as young minds as possible. And uh, I've always been interested in academia, and I continue to teach. And more often than not, our studio became the equivalent of a co-working space. We would all get together, exchange ideas, push ourselves in our own understanding of what can be done in terms of architecture. And there was exploration in terms of materials. We were questioning everything that we knew and understood in terms of spaces. And this particular project also, it was called Design Against the Elements, and it was a project in Manila where we had to design public housing. And one of the things that we did, it's evident in this particular view, is activating the terrace plane of this entire housing project, because we felt like that real estate is sometimes quite undervalued when we think of housing projects, or when we think of architecture in general. And kind of this was us flipping our own way in which we look at public spaces and the public realm. And this was the layout, and this essentially was housing for the university itself. So we had to accommodate all of the other elements, such as a play area, community hall, etc., within the entire housing block. And the key thing, the reason it was called Design Against the Elements, was to ensure that this building or this built structure would perform fairly well and keep people safe during a monsoon, or during heavy winds, or during floods, which was very common in this area given the natural contours of the space. So we did not want to cut and fill and fill up the entire site and probably create issues for other areas, but we essentially respected the entire natural contour and elevated our buildings slightly to ensure that something like this would not happen. And we spent some time exploring detailed cross sections. And what is interesting to me about this project as well is that the entire common corridor doubles up as a balcony and a congregational and social space in this design. And all of the compact units are designed in such a way that there is a possibility of them to kind of engage with each other, which we also thought is something of a lot of meaning in a housing project. We continue to kind of push our understanding and push our design journey in terms of creating spaces with dual character, or with multiple characteristics, with the Spire Tech competition as well, where it was the larger brief was to essentially design an IT complex in Gurgaon. But Gurgaon, as we all know, Gurugram, as it is sometimes also called, it used to be nothing but agricultural land before. So we questioned whether we could find a way to kind of bring some of that in, and create a marriage of that along with high-tech infrastructure that's also coming up in parallel due to the sheer demand of this in a place like Gurgaon. So a lot of our early days as a practice and as a studio went into a lot of these explorations through such work. And I'm not going to really get into the details of the competition itself, but to summarize, we wanted to ensure that we activate a larger central space that is accessible to all, and we use as much of staggered terrace area that would respond to the natural environment and the natural conditions for urban agriculture. And this was our first kind of dive into understanding urban agriculture at this scale as well. And coming to this project again, it's called Shift Focus. I think it's very aptly named because the project was to come up with ideas to look at what would make an ideal Indian street or an Indian road. And the diagram on the left kind of suggests how, although most of our roads are made up of, people like you and I that use these roads, but a lot of the priority is given towards, motor vehicles. And this was something that we were constantly questioning, because there are so many things at play here, because the way we experience spaces around us, the way we experience our cities, is fully dependent on the way our experience on the road is. And if somebody is walking or jogging or cycling, the time that they have to enjoy that experience gets significantly more. And that itself is great reason for us to shift focus, which was what we are trying to do with this particular project. And this was a project that we won. These are some sections that kind of highlight the importance of lighting, the importance of the way in which our roads are so there's not enough focus on people that may be physically challenged. There's not nearly enough focus on a smooth transition or NMT in general. And in this particular competition, we again explored materiality. We used bamboo as a very unique, idea to see whether that could work as a material in an urban context as well. And these projects slowly led to this very interesting assignment, and I'll call it a project called Houses of Mylapore, where I was called by a journalist, a friend of mine, to conduct a small little walk around Mylapore. And in spite of our studio being close to Mylapore, in spite of me living close to Mylapore, walking through some of those narrow lanes was such a eye-opening and a mind-blowing experience, because that really drove home the point of how little, especially as architects, I feel that we engage with our surroundings, be it immediate or be it like larger surroundings. And I think that is so crucial to the way we practice as well. So this opportunity was wonderful. We had a beautiful heritage walk in this area. We spent a lot of time researching the architecture, the evolution of Mylapore as a neighborhood itself. And we created maps like the ones you're seeing on the bottom right. And one thing led to another, and we started getting obsessed with this. And the reason for this obsession was also something that shook us up very badly, which was we did the same walk a few months later. And within the span of a few months, a lot of what we saw a few months before didn't exist anymore. These houses had all just disappeared. And I think one of the reasons this doesn't come into the public realm or public news is because these are mostly in the residential segment. But there is such beautiful architecture that is to be celebrated in our city, and we decided to scale this up. So this, in a sense, planted the seed for many of our projects which work in the heritage space, and eventually planted the seed for one of the initiatives that we started as called Madras Inherited, which I will talk to you a little bit more about moving forward. And this obsession and this celebration of the city translated into so many more things, such as souvenirs and custom designed, building inspired and build form inspired souvenirs that we make now. And these are things that we're very, very excited about as a studio. Madras Inherited now collaborates with Triplo Studio to work on small scale urban projects, where the larger goal is to celebrate the city through heritage especially, but to also activate residual spaces and dead spaces in the city. I mean, we have so many examples of them all over most of our urban context, and this is a small proposal that we hope to see get completed by in a few months, which is along the Besinagar stretch. If anyone is familiar with Besinagar, it is a neighborhood in the south of our city, which in a sense is enveloped by a large green lung space called the Theosophical Society. And we essentially work with the compound wall of that and the road space, and we identified a small area that was being used badly. It was being used as a spot for open defecation, in spite of being a popular spot where a lot of people would stop, take photographs. And the bougainvillea is a beautiful flower that we had here. So, in a sense, this space that we created was a tribute to the bougainvillea. It's a tribute to the Theosophical Society, which acts as such an important part of this geography itself. And our experiments and our work in trying things that were never done before continued at this particular project as well. It was very exciting for us because while some of the work that I've shown you may be large in terms of its urban impact, I think as a studio we definitely think from pin to piano. We are obsessed with small scale product design as well. And this particular project was about how to create a house that could be flexible. So we called it Reconfigure, and we came up with detailing using aircrete and using reinforcement rods to kind of create wall surfaces that could easily be assembled and easily be shifted elsewhere. This rendering that we have in front of us kind of explains how a normal living space could suddenly become a double height space as a result. These are some more views. I may not get into too much of the technical explanations, but on your left is essentially the toolkit that we used, and on our right are details as to how we envision making of the building. And these are suggestions on how the detail itself would work for the wall, how waterproofing would essentially work. And this was another competition that we got recognized for. So competitions, as suggested multiple times earlier, I think for us are so important because they give us a great playing field for creativity. And the competitions also allow us to immerse into context that we would never otherwise get an opportunity to, maybe. And also it allows us to kind of ask questions about relationships between architecture, the city, our own contributions as architects and space planners towards this constantly interesting relationship. So this particular project, in a sense, also celebrates that relationship, where we wanted to create a building in Guggenheim in Helsinki for the Guggenheim Museum that could constantly be a building that was in flux. So what I mean by that is, if you look at this visualization, some of the framework that you see externally supports a lot of the work done by local artists and is constantly just ejected in and out of this building. So the building constantly is in a dynamic state. So I felt like this was an interesting way to approach the museum typology, because when we look at museums in our own context, I'm forced to ask myself, how many times do I go to the museum once I've already been there once? So the idea was how to constantly also get people attracted to the museum a little more frequently. And one of the best ways to do that, we felt, was to engage with the local. And these are other views that kind of show you how a simple container truck would go and be placed in different public locations within the city and then come back and be plugged into the building itself, that would constantly create a building that has stories to tell on the exterior as well as on the interior. We were then lucky to have all of these questionings pan out into projects that were of greater scale, and this is in Shimoga in Karnataka. And all of this work with the city also helped us understand governance to some extent, help us understand how the city operates and how some of these larger projects manifest and translate over time, understand the politics of projects and so on. So in Shimoga, when we went, we were shocked by a gigantic retaining wall that was built by the previous government. And as a smart city project, our goal was to design a riverfront development that somehow factored in that wall, which was terrible for the Brahmaputra River itself. So we had to understand how to negotiate what was already done and continue to create spaces of relevance that would add value to this place. Because in the process of making that gigantic wall that I have spoken about, that's visible on the screen as well, what it did was it cut off the relationship between the community and the river, and it started creating anti-spaces, negative spaces that were used very poorly. That was the opposite intent, but unfortunately that was what ended up happening. And our goal was to approach this design not as one large 4 kilometer stretch, but break it up into the communities that basically engaged or responded to the different stretches. Some of them were purely residential in nature, some of them were larger religious conclaves in nature, and so each one had to be thought of slightly differently. For us, this was a very, again, a fascinating project to kind of delve into. We looked at access in a big way, we looked at the blue green cover in a big way, and try to ensure that our solutions were feasible and practical from that perspective. And we split up our project into 4 zones, 4 larger zones that did slightly different things. And this is, of course, detailing of furniture and detailing of railings. All of these elements are so crucial to the way space is perceived, especially in the public domain, because more often than not, I'm of the opinion that we sometimes design things to actually reduce the incentive uh, to use them. So I think that's a very important shift that I think we need to see in the way we tackle urban spaces, and we tackle any large space for that matter. In 2015, after the floods, I think our practice itself completely, had to go through like a sea change. We had to almost understand and ask ourselves very important questions, such as what are we even doing? Is our work even relevant? Are we really making a change and an impact that we want to make? So we were very fortunate to work with the Bhumika Trust, and who were who were doing some wonderful work throughout the floods in terms of rehabilitation, in terms of supplies of basic essentials and so on. And as a result of that phenomenal work, they received a lot of funding for infrastructure projects, and we worked with them on different low-cost housing projects that we implemented in remote locations of the very urban parts of the city. We worked with them on not just temporary shelters such as the one that you're seeing, but we worked with them on actual modular housing. We worked with them on formal housing, and this particular 3 by 3, 3 by 2, and 2 by 3 grid that you see here was an interesting take on housing that we implemented in Manamati, which is again on the outskirts of the city, where this entire modular system worked when it was either lit, mirrored, replicated, or reversed. So what that did is slightly visible here, where open spaces got clustered up, and this was especially important because, for instance, this addressed women's safety, this addressed social spaces, this addressed even just the way the dynamic within a household was, this addressed the importance of something as simple as the need for privacy in a space like a bedroom. And all of this was tackled and done at a very, very, very low cost. And the process of actually translating this into a streetscape was very rewarding, because we were able to see the impact that this design had. And post which we've essentially been leaning towards work that has this kind of impact. So Little Drops is an NGO that works with it's an old age home, and they were looking for a new facility. And one of the things, we made this beautiful presentation for them, completely and drawn and colored. And the idea here, seen here, is how a courtyard would work. So we broke this large requirement of 400 plus beds into these smaller homes that would each have a courtyard that was treated differently. And the idea was that you could get lost within this entire, say, uh, complex, but every place that you went to had something unique to offer. So there was this sense of safety, knowing that you're very much within this large complex, but at the same time, there is something to look forward in every part of the space that you visit. So these kind of show you how we've treated different courtyards very differently. In some cases, they are just plain surfaces for games to be played. In some cases, they're beautifully landscaped. In some cases, it's a mix of multiple features and so on. And this is what I mean, because this is a large area with a large set of requirements. And while this plan may look quite rigid, formal, and organized, it was the courtyards that essentially brought this entire project to life, in my opinion. And I'm going to conclude with this project because this is the nature of work that our studio is pursuing right now. We've spent post-COVID, we spent a lot of time thinking about the typologies of work that we want to do, the nature of work that we want to do. And I personally feel words like sustainability, etc., are sometimes abused. So I'm not going to use them. But we're very now conscious about ensuring that the projects that we take up may be low budget, but we're very conscious about the impact that they have. So we're currently working on a lot of schools. I think schools as a typology for me personally, as an architect as well, is always exciting. Any institutional project in that, for that matter, is very, very exciting. And this is a school that's coming up in Perumbakam. It's near completion. And this school, we worked with Porothom blocks, again, a new material for us. And it's beautiful to see how it shapes, how it's been shaping up, and the material itself ages gracefully. I can see that over the period of the construction itself. And one of the things we did slightly differently, this is a corporation school, again, to clarify. One of the things that we did slightly differently, while the corporation has certain rigid standards of classroom size, access, etc., the site itself not being rectangular, we staggered our volumes a little bit and created a doubly loaded corridor, which is something you don't really see in most corporation schools, which have a very standardized template of design. So the doubly loaded corridor gave us multiple advantages where there's not necessarily a front or a back to the school, and I think that gives it a sense of a much greater sense of scale, a much greater sense of spaces that you can access and enjoy. And I'm very excited to kind of see this shape up. I'm going to, I think, conclude with this particular project, which in my opinion is a personal favorite because one is it's on my way home. It's close to my heart because of the effort and energy and the challenges that we faced to make this happen. We were asked to work on the design of a foot-over bridge, and initially the bridge itself was meant to be private. But after studying OMR to a great extent, OMR is where this particular foot-over bridge is located in Chennai. It is the IT corridor of the city. And there are a lot of foot-over bridges. All of them fail for different reasons. And one of the main reasons they fail is they are not the safest, they are not the most secure. They sometimes are covered with hoardings, which kind of further adds to the lack of safety that's perceived in some of these foot-over bridges. And we challenged all of these things and asked ourselves how best we could tackle it through design. So one of the first things we did was made it as porous as possible, including the railing itself. And we changed the profile of the railing so that, you don't, nothing about this bridge, as you can see, is conducive to vandalism, is conducive to, say, the sticking of posters, etc. Things that you see that sometimes spoil infrastructure or the way infrastructure looks in our city. And the single pylon structure right in the center acted as a beautiful support to the bridge. And one of the things we learned in the process was that the rules in our city did not necessarily allow a bridge to not be a foot-over bridge, to not be perpendicular to the road. And that is something we were we challenged in the simplest of manners, which was to reduce this walking distance, and we were successful in that. And I think that adds to the dynamism of this bridge when it is looked at from different angles. And essentially, on the left is what you see is the spatial quality that you perceive while you're walking on the bridge. And as you can see, it's well lit. The light is thrown on the ground, which is very, very crucial. And the way in which we, I think, looked at some of these smaller things is something I'm proud of. And I think the fact that most of it was pre-engineered, brought to the site and fixed, makes for its high quality in terms of its execution as well. And through a lot of licensing, through a lot of patient negotiation, we were able to connect this directly into the mass rapid transit system, which makes this bridge even more valuable to the city. And we were able to ensure that it drops off at a location that could be shared by multiple people instead of it being a private bridge that was originally intended to be. So these talk a little bit more about the benefits of some of the design detailing that we had. And another thing that we get asked quite often, because a lot of other bridges in the city are covered, we consciously chose an uncovered or a bridge because, in our opinion, at the end of the day, it's a space of transit. The idea is that you don't really spend time on the bridge, but you use it to go from point A to point B. And even though we've got hot weather, we've got heavy rains, when you quantify this into time, I still believe that, an uncovered bridge works a lot better because of reasons visible in the diagram. People avoid people from squatting. This will encourage everyone to use it because of the safety that it adds, and so on. These are some of the very simple structural details, some of the cantilever beams that support the cable stay structure. This slide, I would like to conclude my presentation. I would like to thank SRM once again, SRM University once again, and School of Architecture and Interior Design for giving me this opportunity. And I look forward to all the amazing speakers' presentations. And thank you once again.
Thank you, Architect Tahaer, for your presentation. Now we shall take a short break for our sponsor video.
Epoxy adhesives are widely used in the industry because of their high strength, chemical resistance, and the ability to adhere to different surfaces. But almost all of them have low impact strength and low UV resistance, which makes them weak after long-term use, under stress and limitations. To combat all these issues, we are introducing Bondtight Pro. Bondtight Pro is a high-performance two-component multi-use new generation epoxy adhesive system with room temperature curing. It has very high impact strength, excellent shear strength, better UV resistance, better coverage, and so much more. And it is to be used for bonding various similar and dissimilar materials such as metals, ceramics, wood, leather, rubber, marble, glass, and a lot of other materials. Bondtight Pro is very easy to use. The directions to use are really simple. Step 1. Clean the surface and make sure it is free of dust, unsound material, loose plaster, oil, paint, grease, algae, and corrosion deposits. Step 2. Take equal quantity of part A and part B. Step 3. Mix it for 1 minute with the help of Bond Tight applicator to attain uniform color. Step 4. Apply on the surface. Step 5. Clamp or support the surface for 4 hours. It will attain full strength in 24 hours. And that's all there is to it. You can use it for speakers, marble pasting, automobile repair, and hardwood handicraft. Bond Tight Pro.